On the same day that Billboard announced BTS had broken a 7-year record held by the Rolling Stones, Jimin was asleep on a plane. Not performing, not on a red carpet, not doing press, just sleeping. The way anyone sleeps when they've been giving everything for weeks, and the only private space available is a seat on a jet somewhere over Europe. And somehow, that image, that one completely unguarded, completely human moment, traveled faster than the record-breaking news. That tells you something, and this video is going to spend some time figuring out exactly what. This channel is for the ARMY who understands that the biggest stories about BTS are almost never the ones in the press releases. The record numbers matter, the stadium shows matter, but the thing that has always made this fandom pay attention, really pay attention, is the space between those headlines. The week of June 28th to July 3rd, 2026 was one of the most documented weeks in BTS's recent history. And the part that will actually stay with you isn't the $204 million. Here is the week as it actually happened. June 28th, BTS is between tour legs. Madrid is done. Brussels hasn't started yet. The members scatter across Europe the way people do when they suddenly have unstructured time in cities that aren't home and aren't the next venue. Jin finds a waffle stand somewhere in Brussels and looks genuinely happier than most people do at stadium shows. Suga makes his way to Barcelona, specifically to the Sagrada Familia. If you know anything about Suga's aesthetic sensibility, that choice is not random. He posted a photo on his Instagram, a man standing in front of one of the most architecturally complex structures in the world, something unfinished for over a century, and still the most visited monument in Spain. ARMY noticed the caption, and then they noticed something else, something in the frame that required a second look. June 29th, two things happen. First, Billboard publishes the numbers. BTS has broken the Rolling Stones' 7-year Billboard box score record. The Arirang World Tour has generated $204 million and sold 1.1 million tickets since kickoff in April 2026. In May alone, 12 shows, $127.8 million, 641,000 tickets. BTS posted the highest monthly gross by any group since the box score chart began in 2019. The Rolling Stones' previous record from August 2019 was $95 million. BTS exceeded it by 35%. This is by any reasonable measure one of the most significant commercial milestones in the history of touring music. Second, J-Hope posts a photo on his Instagram story. It's Jimin, lying on top of Jungkook on the private jet, both of them resting, Jimin's eyes closed, his face completely relaxed in a way that people who follow him closely recognize as genuinely rare. The specific quality of stillness that only appears when someone is not managing anything, not their image, not their energy, not the awareness of being watched, just asleep. J-Hope added a caption, a few emojis. The whole thing was posted casually, the way you document a funny moment among friends. And within hours, that photo had traveled farther than the Billboard record announcement. This is the part worth sitting with for a moment. The Rolling Stones record is a genuinely historic achievement. It represents years of work, a global infrastructure, the kind of commercial and artistic influence that very few acts in the history of popular music have ever reached. The announcement of that record should have dominated every conversation about BTS for days. Instead, the most shared content from June 29th was a photo of Jimin sleeping. Why? There are easy answers to that question. Jimin is visually compelling even in unguarded moments, actually especially in unguarded moments. The image was inherently sweet, the kind of candid that tends to circulate quickly in any fandom context. But the easy answer isn't the complete answer. The complete answer has something to do with what that photo represents in the context of everything surrounding it. Because that photo exists on the same day as the record-breaking announcement, same day as the Brussels preparation, same day as Suga standing in front of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. On the most commercially significant day of their touring career, Jimin was sleeping on a plane. And that contrast between the enormity of what they've built and the complete normalcy of how they exist inside it is what made that image hit differently. A few hours after the J-Hope photo circulated, fans started looking more closely at the Suga Barcelona post. Not because anything obvious jumped out. The photo itself is quiet. A person at a famous monument, the kind of thing anyone posts when they're traveling. What fans were looking at specifically was the timing. Cross-referencing Suga's location with the available information about where the rest of the group was on June 28th and 29th, several accounts constructed a detailed picture of how BTS individually navigated those few days between Madrid and Brussels. And what emerged from that reconstruction was something that fans described not as surprising, but as somehow perfectly in character. Suga spent his free days in Europe alone, going to places he specifically wanted to see, moving through cities at his own pace, posting selectively, not for content volume, but the way someone posts when they encounter something they genuinely want to document for themselves. The Sagrada Familia photo was not a PR post. It was not a brand-aligned moment. It was a man who found something beautiful and chose to share it. And the specific choice, the Sagrada Familia, of all the things in Barcelona worth photographing, landed in a particular way for people who have followed Suga's artistic sensibility for years. Something that has been under construction for over a century, designed in its incompleteness, intended to take longer than any single person's lifetime to finish. A building that exists in permanent becoming. ARMY didn't need anyone to make that connection explicit. Here is where the week shifts. Because while Suga was in Barcelona and Jimin was sleeping on planes and the Billboard numbers were circulating across every music industry platform in the world, something else was happening. The Brussels ARMY were preparing. King Baudouin Stadium, 50,000 capacity. Belgium, a country where BTS had never performed, ever. In the entire history of their career, not a single concert date in this country. Which meant that every single person who was going to be in that stadium on July 1st and July 2nd had gotten there through some combination of travel, planning, financial commitment, and years of waiting. There is a specific quality to the audience at a debut concert in a new city. Something that first-night shows carry that subsequent shows at the same venue never quite replicate. The sense that something is happening for the first time, that the air in the building has never held this before. Brussels, July 1st. BTS walked onto a stage in Belgium for the first time in their lives. The surprise songs for Brussels Day 1 were Tomorrow and Boy With Love. If you know BTS's discography, you know that both of those choices carry weight. Boy With Love is, commercially, one of BTS's most recognizable songs. It was the collaboration with Halsey in 2019 that introduced them to an enormous new audience. It has been performed many times, in many configurations, across many tours. But Tomorrow is different. Tomorrow is from 2014. From the School Love Affair era, which is to say from the very beginning of BTS's existence as a recorded act. It's a song about surviving difficult things, about the specific kind of hope that doesn't feel like hope yet, about getting through a night when you don't know what comes next. Suga has talked about that period in interviews. Not extensively, not in detail, but enough that the people who follow his work understand that the early years were not comfortable, that the success was not guaranteed, that there were specific moments when the future was genuinely uncertain. Tomorrow was written inside that uncertainty, and on July 1st, 2026, standing in a country they had never performed in before, on a tour that had just broken a 7-year world record, in front of 50,000 people who had traveled from across Europe to be there, that song came on the soundboard. The members, who were not expecting it, that's the design of the segment, no one knows what's coming, had to hear it and respond in real time. The camera caught Jimin and Suga in the same frame when the first notes played.
And what happened in the next few seconds is the reason that clip became one of the most watched moments from the entire Brussels run. There are moments in live performance that cannot be manufactured, not because performers aren't skilled enough. BTS are, by any objective measure, among the most technically accomplished performers of their generation, but because the thing that makes a moment genuine is specifically its resistance to technique. Suga's face when Tomorrow came on was not a performance. It was recognition, the specific kind that happens when something from very far back in your history appears without warning, in a context that makes the distance between then and now impossible to ignore. 12 years ago, a song written in uncertainty, about getting through the night. July 1st, 2026, that same song playing in a stadium in Belgium on a tour that had just broken every commercial record available to break. The distance between those 2 points is not abstractly large. It is specifically, personally, humanly enormous. And Jimin, who was standing in the same frame when the song started, who has known Suga since before that song existed, looked at him. Not at the crowd, not at the camera, at Suga. For approximately 2 seconds. That's the moment. That's the clip that people can't stop rewatching. Not because of what it means romantically, not because it fits any particular narrative, but because it is, in 2 seconds, a complete document of what 13 years of shared history actually looks like when it appears on a person's face without permission. There is a 2022 interview from the period just before the hiatus, where Jimin was asked about what it meant to be recognized by people who didn't know his history. People who came to BTS through a chart hit or a viral clip and had no context for what came before. He thought about it for a while before answering, and then he said something that has stayed in the fandom for years, the kind of answer that gets brought back out whenever something like Brussels happens. He said, "I want them to feel something real, not because of what we've achieved, because of what it took. Not the record, not the revenue, not the sold-out stadiums, what it took." And Tomorrow, playing without warning in Brussels, in front of 50,000 people who were there for the first time, was 12 years of what it took, arriving in a single chord. The week doesn't end there. After Brussels Day 1, a thread appeared that compiled the full 7 days. Suga at the Sagrada Familia, Jimin sleeping on the plane, the Billboard record, the Brussels debut, Tomorrow on the soundboard, and the 2-second look. The thread was bookmarked more times than any other BTS-related content from the European leg of the Arirang tour. The most common comment wasn't an analysis, it wasn't a theory, it wasn't even a specific observation about any of the individual moments. It was a variation of the same 4 words appearing in 30 different languages, posted by people who had been following BTS for anywhere from 1 month to 12 years. I feel this one. That's the week. 7 days, a Billboard record that rewrote the history of touring, a photo of someone sleeping that traveled faster than the announcement, a man alone at a cathedral that takes longer than a lifetime to build, a debut in a country they had never heard them live before, and a song from the very beginning arriving without warning in the middle of everything. No single one of those things in isolation explains why the week felt the way it did. But taken together as one continuous story about 2 people who have been doing this long enough that their biggest and smallest moments now carry exactly the same weight, it becomes something harder to shake. There's a version of this story where you look at the numbers and understand the scale. $204 million, 1.1 million tickets, 7-year record broken, first concert in Belgium, 50,000 people in a stadium who had never been in the same room with BTS before. Those numbers are real, they matter. And then there's the other version, the Sagrada Familia, the sleeping photo, the 2 seconds when Tomorrow came on and Jimin looked at Suga and Suga already knew. Both versions are true at the same time. And maybe the question worth sitting with, not for a quick answer, but for the kind of answer that forms slowly, the way that cathedral in Barcelona has been forming for over a century, is this. Which version do you think they're actually living in? The one with the record? Or the one with the song from 12 years ago, arriving without warning in a country that had never heard them before? Because if you've been paying attention long enough, you already know that for Jimin and Suga, it has always been both, simultaneously, without contradiction. And that, more than any number on any chart, is what makes this week impossible to summarize in a headline. Some things have to be watched slowly, from the beginning, and some things, once you see them clearly, you can't stop seeing.